Hey, what's up everyone on YouTube and Twitter? So since the last video update, Bitcoin closed its weekly candle below major support. If you're following me on X, obviously you saw the tweets I had posted. So once when Bitcoin closed this weekly below major support, it kind of led to more downside, which was the favorable path at that point. So Bitcoin is now essentially in a range between approximately 89 to 91K. And then this range down here, which is approximately between 74 to 69K. So it probably is likely at this point that going into the coming weeks or the coming months, that Bitcoin will likely test this lower range at some point of support. This is where you would expect to find some bounce if it did test down to those levels. And over the past few years, Bitcoin has generally held its structure. If you go back to since the start of the bull market, every single time that Bitcoin went below support, it has held it, except for one example. But if you look back here, held it right here. This was back in 2023, held this support level on the retest. This was also in 2024 right here, held this support on the retest down here. The only example was down here. We had this weekly close last August. It closed below support, but then the following week reclaimed it. So that was the lone example of where it didn't break down further, end up rebounding the following week. But every single example of when Bitcoin broke higher, it led to more upside. So whenever Bitcoin closes a weekly close above major resistance, it has led to higher prices. If you look right here, this was 2024, moved up. And then obviously when it broke out of this structure back in November, it broke higher. So typically the weekly resistance and support is pretty significant. So now that Bitcoin has broken below this, it does favor that we should see some sort of test of this range in the future. If we zoom in on the daily time frame though, Bitcoin was able to hold these lows. If you look, this was the low from late in February. It went down there, but it wicked below it, but did not close below it. And then since then, Bitcoin has made bullish divergence on the 4-hour and daily time frame. I posted this also on X. If you look here, RSI made a higher low. I said last night there was 4-hour bearish divergence, but there was also daily bullish divergence. So this would lead to a mini sell-off before the daily bullish divergence would start to take over and push Bitcoin upward. And we're currently seeing that right now. If you look at the 4-hour time frame, we're pushing up here. And this essentially is an inverse head and shoulders pattern forming. It can only be confirmed with a close above this neckline. This is approximately around 83.6K to 84K, I would say. And the measured target out of this move, if it does get a close above this neckline, falls around $90,500. And that's where the weekly resistance really lies. So we're going to maybe see some sort of test of this weekly resistance. The only way for Bitcoin to confirm that the bottom is actually in would be to close a weekly back above 89K and really above 91K as well. If it can get a weekly close back above 89K though, that was the support area where it ended up breaking down below. Also was rejected off of this on the weekly time frame. If we did get a weekly close back above this area, then I do think that the low is actually in for Bitcoin and we're not going down to this area. But until that happens, I would still favor that this area will come into play. It might take some time. Maybe it takes a few weeks or a month. Maybe we're in this range for a little while now. It does favor at some point this lower range will come into play. Does it have to? No, but is it likely? Yes. So we'll just respect the supports and resistance that are around Bitcoin currently. And a lot of this has to do with the stock market. If we look at the S&P 500, we covered this in the last video. We were looking for the weekly RSI to make a lower low below this low from back in 2023. It's currently slightly above it. Earlier this week when this wick was a little bit lower, when the candle was a little bit lower, the RSI was lower as well, and it is actually at this level. So the S&P 500 should be close to finding a bottom. Maybe on this weekly candle it ends up closing a little bit lower, and this weekly RSI makes a lower low below this 2023 low. And then from there, if it gets some sort of bounce, it would have the opportunity to essentially find bullish divergence and bounce out of it. The main area of support I'm looking for the S&P 500 to potentially come down to is this low from back here in September. This was around 54.20. And that's the area where if it does come down to, it should be able to find some sort of bounce. If you look at the NASDAQ we also covered in the last video, the weekly RSI is already making a lower low. It's actually back to the 2022 lows of October of 2022, which was the bear market bottom. So this stock market sell-off has been quite extreme, but it is in an area now for both the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 to start to find some sort of support, some sort of rally, and start to bounce at least in the future. And that should definitely help crypto. If we see the stock market start to bounce here, I think crypto will at least get a relief rally. Historically, crypto has a tendency of finding a bottom before the stock market does. If you go back to the 2020 crash, crypto bottomed actually about 11 days prior. So this was the total 2 crypto chart right here. This was on March 13th, 2020. This was when it bottomed, and the stock market didn't bottom until approximately March 23rd. So it bottomed almost 10 days prior approximately. So that was one example of where crypto bottomed prior. And then we go to 2022. We saw the same thing. Crypto bottomed right here. This was June of 2022, but the stock market didn't find its bottom until October of 2022. So it bottomed months prior. So crypto does have a tendency of finding a bottom first. So even if the stock market does continue lower for a few more weeks, it is possible that crypto for the most part has found its bottom here and doesn't have to follow the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ further down. We actually saw that yesterday where crypto was mostly in the green across the board. Everything was bouncing, but the stock market was down 1 to 2% during the day. It ended up closing in the red. So despite the stock market pulling back, crypto was actually in the green. Now we take a look at Bitcoin dominance. Bitcoin dominance is continuing its uptrend. It's pushing this upper resistance. This looks like some sort of double bottom structure. This is the neckline up here around 62.24%. If you measure this out, this would put Bitcoin dominance back at the wick high if we see a candle close above this area. If you look on the weekly time frame as well, this is in position to have its highest weekly close since the last cycle. So while it is possible that Bitcoin dominance did actually top back here back in February, it does look like it wants to go back up because the targeted area would be back to that high. And the largest reason why Bitcoin dominance continues to be strong is because Ethereum continues to not show any sort of strength. It closed the weekly below this support level. This was around 2,050. It immediately went down to the next support around 1,750. And at this point, the next support lies around 1,500. So if Ethereum can't find some sort of bounce or reclaim this resistance area, it probably at some point will want to go down to this area. And Ethereum, we discussed in the last video, has been in a year-long bear market. So until Ethereum gets out of this bear market and finds its bottom, it's just very hard to see Bitcoin dominance seeing any sort of major pullback without Ethereum making a big move up. So if you enjoy my content and would like to support my channel, I have referral links for Coinbase as well as Gemini, which is in the United States. If you trade $100 on Gemini, you get $75 of a crypto of your choice. I also have a Patreon, which is now connected to Discord. I'm posting updates there throughout the day in regards to things I'm seeing, such as the divergences that we saw play out. So if you're interested, I do have the Patreon, and I appreciate all the support. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to leave a comment, like, and subscribe. And if you're watching on X, make sure to subscribe on YouTube as I post all the videos there first. I will see you guys in the next video.